On today's episode of Real Talk Rentals, it's a mailbag episode. We're going through the questions you sent in. Welcome back to Real Talk Rentals, a podcast brought to you by OnQ Property Management. We're here to give you all the tips and tricks that go into owning a rental property. I'm Ben. With me, as always, Mr. Eric Dixon, the go-to expert on all things property management and real estate. And today we're going to test that knowledge yet again because we did a mailbag episode. We put out a call to listeners, customers, clients, everybody, and said, send us your questions. So we've got a collection here that we kind of went through. I pulled out the super inappropriate ones and left those aside. And we'll have our lawyer look at those maybe. And then these ones we're going to dig into today. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Yeah, this reminds me of my favorite podcast, the Bill Simmons podcast.
Yeah.
He does a mailbag like every year.
Yeah.
It feels so
It's
cool.
always fun. Yeah. So what we're saying is we're on that level of Bill Simmons.
Oh, yeah.
All right. I like that. Okay. First question we got. My resident just sent me a 30-day notice to vacate, but it's in the middle of the month. Do I have to prorate the rent for them since it's still 30 days, or should they still be responsible for the full month?
All right. So I should say in every scenario, it'll depend on the lease. And that's kind of the overarching, answer. But in practice and how most leases are written, at least here in Arizona, is if you gave a notice any day, let's say any day in February, then the last day of your lease would be the last day of March. So you could give your notice February 2nd, and it'd be March 31st. You give the notice February 28th, the end is March 31st.
Right.
And so it's the end of the month. It's the last day of the month following the month following the month you gave the notice.
Sure.
That's like the most confusing.
So you probably want to do like, if you're hoping to move out in February, you want to do like January 30th.
Yeah.
Let them know, hey, next month is going to be our
now
30
January
days.
gets tricky because if you wait till January 30th, technically 30 days later is March.
Oh yeah, freaking February.
So usually, we'll work with people.
Yeah.
Like, you gave your notice by the end of January, but it's like, hey, technically 30 days from now is March, and then it'd be the last day of March. But
yeah,
you'd have to really, your landlord would really not like you if that was the case. And I would say you just want to make sure your lease, whatever lease you're using, whatever lease your property management company is using, is clear about it. Because the last thing you want is the tenant gives the notice on the 14th, thinking they can move out on the 14th of the next month. And then you're like, no, man, you're stuck till the end of the month.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, I was planning on it. I can't pay double rent. I need my deposit back. And then it, creates issues. Just make it clear.
All right. Next question. How does a 10-day non-compliance work when residents are in violation of the lease?
All right. Timing is awesome with this one. We had our attorney actually do kind of a lunch and learn type thing yesterday.
Yeah.
So this was one of the questions brought up in that even. So worded a little bit differently, but let's just say, for an example, there's a resident with an unauthorized pet and we give a 10-day notice. So
and maybe we should real quick clarify a 10-day notice is like
a non-compliance notice.
Saying you're not following the lease. Yep. You got 10 days.
Yep. You got 10 days.
Okay.
Now, most people think that, hey, I gave you the notice, Ben, you had a pet. You weren't supposed to have a pet and you got to get rid of that pet today. But really what it means is like, no, you have 9 more days where you can break this rule and I can do nothing about it.
Right.
But you have 10 days, right? You got to rehome the dog, or you've got to get permission through your manager or through the owner.
Sure.
Maybe then
10 days to figure this issue out.
10 days to figure it out. And then on day 11, then if the dog is gone and we do we re-inspect and the dog's gone, it's like it never happened. So it's not even, I can't even ding it against you really. It's like it never happened. But if you do it again, then I can give you a 10-day notice to move out.
Okay.
So it's like, hey, it's like it never happened, but hey, dude, if you do it again, like now you're really in trouble. And so, you want to make sure that you're issuing them correctly. It's not a 10-day notice and then, hey, if you don't fix it, I'm kicking you out.
Yeah.
It's like, no, I'm giving you the chance to correct it. You can cure the breach. And then day 11, you do have to re-inspect. You can't just say, hey, I'm calling you. Hey, did you get rid of the dog?
Right.
You got to do that. So
it's kind of assuming the best in people, right? Like, absolutely. Hey, you didn't realize, I'm sure that it said in the lease, even though you signed it, you can't have pets.
And I would say
I'll give you 10 days to fix this and then it's gone.
Pets are tricky, right? Because they're like a member of your family. And it's like,
absolutely.
well, I got my dog. I didn't want to tell you because I didn't want to get denied on the application.
Yeah.
Or
I got a dog and this time my kids love it. And
Absolutely.
it wasn't even on my radar for pets.
So those, and then the other one is occupants that, let's say you started dating somebody, or you wanted a roommate, or you got married.
Yeah.
That person needs to be on the lease if they're moving in, but oftentimes you don't even think about it. You're just like, oh, don't even think about it. We do an inspection. We notice, hey, there's multiple people here. There's only one person on the lease.
Yeah.
And then those non-compliance ones are tricky because it's like, well, I'm not just going to kick them out.
Yeah.
So anyway, it is much better if you're a resident, just make sure that you let your property manager or your landlord know, and you can avoid those non-compliance.
And they should be available for you to ask a question if you don't know.
Yeah.
It could just be like, hey, I'm getting a pet. I don't remember if it said I'm allowed to have one or not. Don't assume.
Yep.
All right. I just received a written notice from my resident that I have to fix the water heater in 5 days, or they can legally vacate, or they can pay for the repair and take it off the rent. However, I have a home warranty. And I'm working on it, but delays are happening when it comes to ordering the parts. What should I do?
All right. So number one, just cancel your home warranty.
Yeah,
just get rid of that thing. Now, so no home warranties. I was telling Ben yesterday. I mean, the premise is there, like it's a good product, but it really only works the best if you're the homeowner and you live there, because you're willing to deal with the crap to save the money.
Sure.
It's horrible for tenants. It's horrible for property management companies. I'll just put that out there. But really, health and safety issues, you got to get completed and done within those 5 days. There's rare instances where you could say, hey, we did order the part, and it's going to be a week or two. That's fine. But in the meantime, you got to put them up in a hotel or give them a rent credit that's agreeable or whatever.
Yeah.
So we do deal with this with home warranties. Unfortunately, sometimes it's like, yeah, you could order the part and save the few $100, but it would actually cost you less if you just pay a plumber to fix it or replace it.
Right.
Because then you don't have to do a rent credit. You don't got to put them up in a hotel, and they end up more often than not. It's less cost to the landlord.
Yeah.
Just to hire the licensed contractor to fix it than it is to save money, in quotes, to go through the home warranty.
Yeah. I remember talking to one of our maintenance coordinators one time, and an owner was waiting for something. I think it was for like a toilet or something. And it was like, we're waiting for this part to arrive. I was like, well, how much is the part? And they're like, it's $100. I'm like, so we're making this person go without a toilet because this guy wants to save $100.
Yeah.
Like,
and
no, it's a bad call. And I don't even think the owner was thinking of it like that. Cause like you said, it's one thing if that warranty's on you and you're like, I'm willing to pee in the backyard for a week, cause I know it's coming. But when it's out of sight, out of mind, and you're putting that on somebody else, And
I say that, and I would never even do it. I had a home warranty on one house, and it was just like, it was such a bad experience with the vendor. For the most part, the vendors are so busy. They have so many work orders for these home warranties that they don't really care, man. I mean, they're just pushing work through, and it's not their fault. It's the home warranty overloads them. They don't pay them enough per thing. Right. And it's a volume game. It's just really hard to do as a landlord. So you really rarely save money too.
So. Yeah. All right. Next question. Can I legally evict the resident over an HOA notice fine they refuse to pay or comply with?
So I would say technically, yes. HOAs, they have a lot of rights themselves. I mean, I've lived in a community where the HOA actually foreclosed on them. We're not talking about a rent, but they foreclosed on the property because they weren't complying, right? So they can go that route. Typically, so I say technically, yes, you could do that. Now, there's typically an easier solution, though, is you just work with the tenant to say, hey, if you keep getting landscape fines, and it's in our lease, we're going to just add landscaping as a charge on your rent, and you have to pay with your rent every month, and we'll just take care of the landscaping.
Yeah.
So if it's something like landscaping or, something, I'm trying to think of something else like the tenant would be responsible for,
or even like the front of the house. They got a flag. I got a notice from my HOA because I had a unapproved flag.
Yeah, unapproved flag or holiday lights is one. My tenant, I just got one in the mail, and it said holiday lights are still up in March or April or May or whatever in the spring. And I sent it to my property managers. They sent it to the tenant. They're like, oh my gosh, I'll get it right down. But if they just didn't comply, it'd be easier for me to say, I'm just going to pay a handyman to go take them down for you and charge you rather than evict the tenant for not complying it. So
it's ultimately avoid the eviction at all costs, right? There's usually a solution.
There are some landlords that are like, how can I evict them? That just sounds fun.
And it's like, trust me, it's not.
It's
not fun for anybody, like the tenants don't want to be evicted. You don't want to go through all that court work stuff. All right. On that note, unfortunately, I had to evict my tenant.
Okay.
But they left all their belongings in the property. Legally, what are the next steps in removing the items?
Good question. So there's 3 ways that you can give back a property. One is the tenants give back keys. So it's either the end of the lease or whatever. They just walk into the office or walk to the landlord and say, boom, here's possession. In that case, they're giving up possession willingly. You don't have to store their items. So if they left something in the house and they surrendered keys, you don't have to keep anything. In the other 2 scenarios, an abandonment or an eviction, you have to store them for 14 days. And I should say this is in Arizona. So
it could be different elsewhere.
It could be different. And even in Arizona, that time frame used to be longer, and it's down to 14 days. So if there's an abandonment and you go through the proper channels to do an abandonment and you get possession back, if there are items, you do have to store them either at the property or at storage for 14 days. And then an eviction, same thing. Once the writ is executed, you take over possession. You got 14 days.
14 days. Yep. I'm always surprised when we get like a move out inspection and, we have to charge the tenants to haul off a bunch of stuff they left there. And they're like, but I don't want that stuff. And it's like, we don't want it either.
Yeah, no one wants that stuff.
Yeah. You should have taken it with you and thrown it away, like can't just leave it in the house. All right. Are there repairs that I am not required by law to do? That's a rough one.
What's funny is exactly the type of owner that is. Right? Or landlord. So it's the classic, like, Ben, you always say it, but don't be that guy.
Don't be that guy. Come on.
So it's if you're asking that question, you probably do need to do the repair. That's probably the simple answer. But there are extreme cases. Like I have personally had tenants and obviously we manage for properties that have some that they call and say, hey, my fan is wobbling. And it's like, well, if it's like wobbling off the ceiling, boom, that's a work order for sure.
Yeah, safety.
If it's just, I don't know.
They're like, I'm not sure, but I think it's got an angle to it.
As I'm saying that to you too, I'm like, if there's a safety issue, you think it's going to fall off the ceiling or the blade's coming off and you can't fix it real quick yourself. Yeah, do you know what? Submit it. But there are some, it's like, hey, the faceplate is got painted while they painted the walls. It's like, hey, we're not going to come and do that repair.
Yeah.
But we will notate it to make sure we don't charge you on the way out.
Yeah.
But obviously health and safety and different things we don't want to get out of. You need to do those things. I think you said yesterday.
Oh yeah. My microwave has a pixel out on it. It's a little digital.
You can't tell if the 8 is a 0 or a
yeah. I mean, if I'm cooking something for 8 minutes in the microwave, it might be a bigger problem, but it's not a big deal. It's a little corner, and it's like, I'll let the landlord know so she can handle it, but it's not something that I'm like submitting a maintenance request.
That's actually,
you got to fix this.
And that's a great thing. It still cooks your food. It still works. You can still, it's still functional. Yeah.
And honestly, I would never care if they fix it ever. I just don't want her to think I broke it.
Yep.
Because exactly. I don't want to get charged for it, but it's fine. It works great. Does what it's supposed to do. It's just like, hey, just so you know.
Yeah, that's a perfect example though. The landlord's not required by law, going back to the question.
Yeah.
Required to do that. Yeah, if they want to, sweet. You gotta get a new microwave. But
sure.
Yeah, no, that's a great example.
Yeah. All right. This is a very specific question. Why doesn't pre-leasing work anymore?
This must come from a client that we pre-leased and it didn't rent, didn't lease in time. So for those that are listening, so pre-leasing is kind of what we coin as you're marketing a property and the current tenant hasn't quite moved out yet. So maybe we market it 2-3 weeks in advance. Then we put a move-in date for, a week or 2 after the tenant moves out, so you can get it cleaned up and ready. Traditionally, I'd say when we started, a decade ago, it was bread and butter. It's like, heck yeah, man, you pre-lease it. And then you have applications and it's usually rented by the time the tenant even moves out.
Sure.
That still happens sometimes. So when they say it doesn't work anymore, I would say it doesn't work as often as it used to. And I think it's because people want more than ever to actually walk through the house and say, hey, how clean is it going to be? I want to feel the floor plan. There's enough inventory out here where I don't need to put an application on a house and get approved without seeing it first. So we are actually shifting our way of doing things too, is we'll still list it a week before or like a little bit before the tenant moves out. But the biggest reason is because of this day and age now where you find all your properties on the internet.
Yeah.
There's a timer. The DOM is what we call it. It's the days on market.
Right.
And if that DOM is high, what do you think as a renter? You're like, what's wrong with this place?
Yeah. The price is right, but it's been on the market for 45 days.
Yeah.
So there's something wrong with it.
Yeah. And let's say you marketed it 45 days before the tenant moves out, and you've got all these people that would love to see it. The tenant moves out, they all see it, and they're kind of like, whatever. It's not that great. On Zillow or Trulia or these third-party websites, you're 45 days on the market, and the tenant just moved out. And so you've got this stale, crappy listing that's not moving, and you would have been better off to not list it out at all, let the tenant move out, get it ready, and then day one, you have that flood of people come see it.
Yeah. Well, and plus too, we were talking about this yesterday, but there may be things that you're gonna do once that tenant moves out.
Oh yeah, totally.
Oh, you know what? We're gonna take that tree out in the backyard that's leaning all wonky. Well, prospective tenants don't know that, so they're looking at like, I don't want to live in
pictures too.
Yeah, like I don't want to live in a house where a tree's gonna fall on there. Forget that. And it doesn't show its best because it hasn't been through that rent ready. It hasn't been brushed up and ready.
No, I just had one myself that we replaced carpet and paint. So if they would have looked at previous photos you have to use previous photos.
Yeah.
They would have been like, oh man, even a year ago, or 2 years ago, that carpet was kind of it's really brown. Well, we went in there after, painted everything kind of newer, white and gray and white, replaced some fixtures, did new countertops. And it's like, if we would have pre-leased it, it would have been...
You never would have known.
We would have never known, and it would not have been as big of a success in renting it for more money. So
okay. I want to sell my house, but I'm in the middle of a lease with the resident. Is there anything I can do?
Yes. So I love this because I love the buying and selling of real estate. It's a lot of what I do, what I've been doing even before I got in property management. It is tricky though, because technically you can sell a house anytime, but the lease stays with the house. So if you're, say you're 6 months in, you're in the middle of the lease, you have 6 months left, listing it, throwing it up on the MLS can be tricky. It's been done before. Yeah. But the tenant has to be on board. You've got to work with them and say, hey, when are we going to do showings? When are you available? They usually have no incentive to make sure it looks good, smells good, shows good, staged. They're like, dude, you're basically telling me I can't renew my lease. Yeah. Unless an investor buys it. And that's the other thing, is if you've got 6 months left, the buyer pool is just investors. So a family or a person that wants to buy it and move in as their occupied, their primary residence, an owner occupied home, they're not even interested because they're like, no, dude, I want to move in. I don't want to have a 6 month lease after I buy. And so it does get tricky. Where we find a ton of success, this is kind of a shameless plug, but it's where we have success, other companies have success doing it, is when our landlords raise their hand and say, I want to sell, and I'm in the middle of a lease, we talk to them about kind of a price range. We're not signing an exclusive listing agreement, but we're trying to get this range. And we say, hey, if I can get an investor to give you that price, would you be interested in just selling it mid-lease to another investor? They're like, heck yeah. And so it's a win-win.
Built-in tenants.
It's a built-in tenant. We retain the management. The seller gets what they want. The buyer gets an off-market deal. We call them pocket listings, which some people are familiar with, but they're kind of that listing in your back pocket that you're like, hey, if I have a buyer for $500,000 in Gilbert, hey, that's weird. I have this listing that kind of a listing. It's not really a signed listing with a sign in the yard on the MLS, but but
I know this guy will sell it.
I know it'll sell. Yeah. So anyway, we pair those up all the time, and it saves the buyer, saves the seller, saves the tenant, and the tenants are usually stoked. They're like, are you kidding me? You sold it and I didn't have to show it. Yeah. Except to an inspector and an appraiser, and maybe we had to show it one time. So it can be a win-win-win. That's more often than not the best way to sell in the middle of a lease. So.
Okay. This one we just kind of did a podcast on, but I have not researched Section 8 housing very much, but what are the pros and cons for this program? I understand that some laws have recently changed regarding residents on the program.
Oh yeah, it came up because the new laws coming out.
Yeah,
so
top of mind.
So we get a new governor in Arizona, and suddenly they want to pass source of income as a protected class as far as fair housing. which it's not a huge deal on the surface, right? It's like, you know what? I get it. There's voucher programs, people that need rental assistance. They need the government program to help them. Everyone's okay with that. So I'd say the pros are, your tenant pool, you're kind of being forced to accept, some of these programs, which it's not a negative. The negative becomes when we're dealing with the government and there's just a lot of paperwork, a lot of red tape. And we're hopeful because they've committed to hiring more and making the processes more efficient. We're hopeful that they can bring stuff more online. Their turnaround times for inspections and approvals can be faster.
Right.
There's more case workers with, bandwidth to take on caseload and stuff like that. So I'd say the pros are things like the guaranteed rent, or the Section 8 does annual inspections, and they're very good about rental increases even. Yeah. And we see it more often than not that they're willing to increase to market rent and different things. They've even made exceptions that are higher than their allotted amount, in certain cases. So there are a lot of pros. I'd say that, again, the only con is just the paperwork. And it's
if you've ever dealt with getting something from the government.
Just think in your head like DMV, birth certificate, like social security card.
Yeah, there's just a lot of hoops.
Like passport.
Yeah.
And it just sounds horrible.
I think too, we were discussing this when our lawyer came in, was going over this stuff with us, but it a lot of people are afraid like, oh, I have to take Section 8 no matter what. And it's like, you do, but all your other rental qualifications still stand.
Oh, they still apply. Absolutely.
You don't have to take them if their credit score is 100. Yeah. You could say, no, this is still my minimum. It's just the income. No, that's you can't.
And that's a great point. So they still have to qualify in all the other factors, right? So it's criminal, sex offender, credit score. Their debt to income now is just based off, or their income qualification is just based off their voucher and then their percentage that they're paying. So it's just a different calculation, but you're right. They have to qualify their landlord history. All that stuff still has to check. So
it's just literally the income. You can't look at it and say, you check all the boxes, but I don't like that voucher. So I can't take it. And
for those that need the program or on different assistance programs, it's a great program. Like, it's great. It needs to exist. There's different things. There's always going to be people that take advantage of it that are on Section 8, but they drive a $100,000 car.
Yeah. And there's always going to be bureaucracy involved where there's a lot of hoops to jump through. So
I get it. We're just hopeful that it will become more streamlined because it is tricky right now. For sure.
All right. Last two. How much does it cost to break up with a property management company? I believe they mean cancel. And when is it time to make that call?
Dude, I've never heard of that. Breakup.
We're breaking up.
Yep. So again, it kind of depends, kind of like that lease question. It depends on the owner's agreement, or the management agreement, I should call it. Ours is, there's a 30-day cancellation policy, no fees, cancel at any time. And we do that because we feel like we have to earn your business every month. A lot of companies are like that, but then there's the far extreme. On the other side, there's companies that have heavy cancellation fees. And we're dealing with one right now that would love to come over. They've got 10 or 11 properties. It's going to cost them almost $10,000 to cancel.
That's insane. And
they're sitting there going like, man, this company has me by the throat here, and I can't come over because I don't have the $9,000, $10,000, $11,000 to cancel.
Yeah.
But you guys are, this is just an anecdotal, scenario, right? But they want to come over. Our fee structure is great for them. We feel like our service is a better fit, but they're like, dude, I can't pay $10,000. And so what they're going to do is they're going to wait, 8 or 9 months or whatever it is. And they're just going to begrudgingly stay where they're at until their cancellation fees are hundreds of dollars. Come over, So there's a huge array of, it could be zero. It could be a lot. So just read your contract.
Read your contract as well. It's like when you see these cell phone company ads and it'll be like, you get a free iPhone. And then it's like in the fine print with 2-year contract commitment. And it's like, but if you cancel, that phone is not free anymore. Like suddenly you're paying for it. So read the fine print.
Exactly. Great analogy.
All right. Last question. Can I leave items in the rental for tenants to use? And this is exact wording that came in the question. It's really awesome stuff and they will like it.
I want to know who it is and what they're leaving. Technically yes, but don't. Please don't.
Bad idea.
Again, don't be that guy. That's like, hey, I'm leaving the pool table in the dining room.
Yeah.
And they're like, I don't want your pool table, bro.
Like, I'm a family of 5. I want a dining room table. Like, yeah.
But things like it is funny. Some stuff is just hard to move. And I say pool table because they're just hard to move.
Yeah.
Exercise equipment or, TVs that are on the wall and they're 10 years old. So they're not these light flat screens. So like, oh, that thing's like a fixture on the wall. It's staying. Like, number one, tenants don't want your stuff.
No.
Your crap, realistically. But number two is, if you leave it and they break it, then you seem to think you can charge them for fixing it too.
Yeah. So it's something they didn't want in the first place.
They didn't even want it, dude.
Yeah.
Like, if your pool table wasn't here, they wouldn't have broke it. So just get rid of it.
It all comes back to what we said of like, treat it like an investment. Don't treat it. This isn't a storage place anymore. Don't leave stuff that's yours. Like, this is an investment property.
And this is the great point. This happens the most in that transition from it's my primary residence to it's becoming a rental. And you do have to you got to turn it off. It's not my primary residence. I'm not emotionally attached.
Nothing in there is mine anymore. Yeah.
Get rid of it, and just clean slate it. Get rid of the pool table now. And then tenant 1, 2, 3, 4, 10 years from now, no one has to deal with it.
Yeah.
It's not like what happens is if we get one tenant that's like, fine, I'll keep the pool table. This landlord suddenly thinks, see, tenants love my pool table. Yeah. And you're like, gosh dang it. We should have just put our line in the sand and said, take it or we don't want it.
Yeah. All right. That is it.
Mailbag, man.
Good times. All right. So be sure to follow the podcast wherever you get your podcast and leave us a 5-star review if you can. It really helps out. And we will see you guys next time.